information on evacuation from the ATO zone. I would like to invite Iryna Gerashenko, MP and the President's envoy for conflict settlement in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and also Mykola Kuleba, authorized representative of the President of Ukraine for Children's Rights, and Mr. Vasyl Stayetsky, who's the Deputy Head of Ukraine's Emergency Service of Ukraine. You're welcome. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. We would like to inform you that as our colleague Mr. Lysenko has confirmed, the hottest direction in the ATO zone, talking about the danger for civil population, is the Baltseva direction, where unfortunately there is the threat for local population. As soon as the aggravation of situation started there, we realized that whole infrastructure is destroyed there. There are no possibility to supply water and electricity there and heating. After that, Ukrainian authorities were trying to coordinate all the efforts to evacuate the civilian population, first of all children, and together with Mr. Kuleba and the representatives of the Ministry of Emergency Situations, we had meetings with international humanitarian missions which are accredited in Ukraine, the Red Cross, OSCE, and the organization UN, to coordinate the efforts of the Ukrainian authorities and these international missions to create humanitarian corridors to evacuate people. And thanks to the common efforts we managed on the 6th and 7th of February, we managed to create such humanitarian corridors, and that allowed us to take away many people out of there. Before that, what was happening was the bus would go to Debaltseva, people would jump into the bus to be able to leave the area. Starting from the 28th of January till today, more than 5,000 people were evacuated by our emergency services from the areas of Debaltseva, Avdiivska. These are the villages, or like Chernuhina, who are the villages which are shelled at all the time, and the government gave 2 armored buses to evacuate people in them. Unfortunately, we failed to avoid the victims, and there are people who were killed out of the representatives of the emergency services, but one person was captured, and despite the Geneva Convention, which prohibits to detain, take captive medical doctors or rescue people, this person was tortured to death because they found the uniform of the rescue person, but the person didn't have any weapons. So the Ukrainian authorities appeal and continue to appeal to international organizations so that we have to put all the efforts possible to create such humanitarian corridors to be able to evacuate as many people as possible, first of all children and women. I would like to thank, on behalf of Ukrainian authorities, on behalf of the government, on behalf of the president, the volunteers who are doing a lot, first of all in the transit points, and they work a lot on receiving the IDPs in Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. They help us to provide food to these people, and we will appeal to international organizations that we need to strengthen the assistance to Ukraine related to receiving people, because the burden is huge. We have about 1 million of IDPs now. The key problem today is the following. We need urgently the leadership of ATO to address the issue of adding to the list of those people who have the right to receive the status of IDPs, the settlements, Vugligorsk, Debaltseve, and so on, because these are the settlements which are in the epicenter of shellings, and people leave these places, and these places are to be included into this list. And together with Mr. Kuleba, with the security, with the emergency service, we address the leadership of the ATO, and we hope that in the nearest future these people will get this status.
And we also we also want to, as soon as possible, enact the law about military and civil administrations that this Parliament adopted last week. And this will give the governors of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, Kirtenko and Moskal, adopt urgent decisions about personnel issues and help to civilian population. First of all, to solve humanitarian and social issues in those cities which actually remain without local authorities, because the separatists from local authorities have fled. I also want to thank Mr. Vasil Stoitsky, the head of our emergency service, who was all the time in Debaltseve and was in fact arranging the transportation of people and the creation of transit points, and Mr. Kuleba, as a representative of the president, was present there for 2 days, and they will tell you about their position in a moment. I was in transit camps of IDPs. I'll tell you honestly, there is a lot of problems that the authorities have to solve. We have analyzed the problems. We have written special reports and addresses to the government and to international organizations. And we were also in Luhansk region, where the humanitarian aid was sent, including to local hospitals, to Severodonetsk hospital, which is now being organized. And we talked to Mr. Moskal about the humanitarian agenda for Donbass. And now I give the floor to my colleagues who have just came from the area. They saw everything with their own eyes, and they helped hundreds of people to leave the shelling zone. Mr. Stoitsky. Good afternoon, everybody. Maybe the hardest thing in this work was the organizing component in order to introduce the mechanism of evacuation, which is not simple. This is about live people who have suffered as a result of this war, as a result of explosions that sound every day. Psychologically, they were not prepared to this, and it was rather complicated to do this during practically combat actions launched by the terrorists. As far as organizational component is concerned, there was a operational headquarters headed by Governor Kirtenko and respective services, nutrition service and transportation service, who were performing their duties in a clear-cut and timely way. Another component was defining clear-cut routes through cities, through road checkpoints, safe routes by which we could deliver people to safe places and then continue to provide help on territories that are not shelled or bombed. From Debaltseve, from Avdiivka, these are almost identical cities. 10,000 people remained in Avdiivka and 6,000 in Debaltseve that had to be evacuated. At the moment, we have evacuated almost 5,000 people to safe places. And at Konstantinivka railway station and Slovyansk railway station, there are points of meeting of those people. And later, they created a respective operational headquarters in Kiev, where many of those people went, and they were distributed throughout the territory of Ukraine at some sanatoria and hostels and hotels. As of today, not a single person or not a single family have applied to mass media or local executive bodies saying that they were not given respective conditions, and they all got some social benefits paid to them. The work that was conducted, of course, needs, as Ms. Gerashenko said, it does need humanitarian corridors through which we would be able to transport people safely, but those corridors were organized only twice. We have met the office of OSCE in Kramatorsk more than once, and they practically, when they were at a negotiation table with us, they were calling their representatives on the other side of the front line in order to arrange for the corridors. This is a very urgent question and issue. We should arrange humanitarian corridors through international organizations and use those corridors to safely transport people and, of course, transport humanitarian aid to dangerous areas. At the moment, we have no such corridors, but even today and tomorrow, we have specific objects in mind and specific meeting points where the buses will go and armored vehicles will go, and they will take people away. In such hotspots as Chernuhina, people didn't want to board the buses, but they trusted the armored vehicles, and more than 100 people were evacuated with the help of armored cars with repainted white and with inscriptions that this is humanitarian transport, not to be targeted. We did risk quite a lot because such lorries had to be used during the daytime, because in the night you could not discern them and they could come under fire. Today and tomorrow the work continues. The drivers of lorries and buses are our specially trained drivers if civilians do not want to drive those vehicles, and they drive even without body armor. I have just came from Debaltsevo. I can arrange I can confirm that the emergency services have worked to the highest mark. I know that on Friday part of the transport came back empty because all the people who wanted to be evacuated did so. And on Saturday, as far as I know, more than 1,000 people within 2 days. But about corridors, I want to tell you, when we were going on Saturday, when the corridor had to be in place, they did fire in direction of our transport from the side of the so-called DNR. We saw the projectiles exploding, so I address again the international organizations saying that you should help to evacuate families with children. I was working together with the first deputy head of the administration of Donetsk region, Alexander Klemenko, and together with volunteers, we were going around cellars and bomb shelters, and we talked to people trying to persuade them to leave for safer zone. First of all, I see that people are intimidated. Secondly, people are afraid of going elsewhere because they are afraid of being shelled and killed on their way. They're also afraid that they won't be welcome where they go because propaganda has told them for a long time that there are banderites and fascists on the Ukrainian territory and that their children will be taken away from them. But I still know that you can work with families, and this should be our task number one today. First, we should safely evacuate those people, and secondly, everybody should understand that this is a voluntary evacuation. Not a single family and not a single child were taken away by force, like some people disseminate this information through mass media. Thirdly, there should be meeting points and the information should be available to every family. Even if they are in a cellar, they should be sure that they will be safely taken to a safe place and they will be welcomed there and met on dignified conditions. This is what we now need in Debaltseve and other cities where regrettably children and families have to live in shelters and cellars. There's a problem with drinking water, there's a problem with food. We understand that there may be 100 or more of places where people live. You approach a block of flats and they say there's a cellar there, there's a cellar there, and you sound the horn and people start to come out even from the houses where everything is bombed, where there's no glass in the window, and you try to talk to them, and then you see that even the family that at first has a very amicable attitude, if you spend half an hour or an hour and persuade them, then people change their attitudes. After our communication with them, we have not seen once a animosity. We have embraced those people when we were partying, and they were thanking us for support and for talking to them. So, there's an idea that there are pro-Russian people who want to go to Russia. I want to refute this allegation because there's no such thing. And we know that there were buses on Friday who came from the DNR side to evacuate people. Only 30 people agreed to go there. 760 people went to the liberated territory, and 30 people on chic buses went to the direction of the so-called DNR. More than that, this became one of the problems. On Saturday, we got such alarming sounds when the DNR said that they do not want to create a corridor. This was because on Friday, Ukrainians from Debaltseve and Avdiivka boarded the Ukrainian buses and went to Ukrainian-controlled territory, and only 30 people who were deceived by propaganda and intimidated, scared, they went to the other direction. And only because of and on Saturday, we were able to evacuate 260 people. Every 10th person is a child. Regrettably, there are children. For instance, in Slovyansk, we saw there was a 10 days old baby born there. I talked to a family who have two children, a 1-year-old and then an 8-year-old. But I met dozens of children, maybe 100 or so people with whom we managed to talk next to their houses in the cellars. We were able to persuade many people to go away, and people are calling me because there's no phone communication, phone linkage at the moment, and they call us and say, please come back and talk to those people because Today we have people who want to come away, to go away. But this is a very dangerous work. Every volunteer, every representative of the state emergency service is at risk. Even when we have just come into the Baltsova, the military have said that there were subversive groups working during the night, and there are landmines there, and people who live there are constantly faced with a rather serious danger. I know one thing: we should do everything so that not a single person remains there in danger. And of course, there's a lot of issues that we have to solve, because somewhere today we cannot work. When 1,000 people come to Slavyansk, it is very hard to react at once. Although Iryna saw, and she even called me, saying that there are no prams and no drinking water somewhere, we understand that somewhere someone is not ready to welcome so many people. And if there's 5,000 people, then God forbid. But we should even today work out the models and mechanisms that we would be able to receive 10,000 people.
We need to organize work with all the regions, with all the services to provide psychological assistance, because many people are frustrated. They're just shouting. And I was surprised then when talking to children, when you hear all these explosions and the shells everywhere. You are scared, but children got used to that. And that's the most awful thing. When you ask a child, are you afraid? And the child says, no, I'm not afraid. A child gets accustomed to that, and that's not normal. The psychic of the child is ruined, and that is a big problem. And I would like to thank you so much, because these services really worked well. The local authorities work. One more thing. I was very much surprised that local population is very passive. In Slavyansk, for example, I saw many volunteers, emergency service representatives, but I did not see hundreds of local people who would come and provide assistance, who would support the families, who would provide some food products or water. I believe we need to work with local population, and Slavyansk is the population which half a year ago was in the same situation. We need to work with that population so that they help people like they are. Your questions, please. I have a question to Iryna. Makiivsky News. There is a problem in Slavyansk where people are located in some tourist camps, and they cannot pay for the services because this tourist camp has the account which they have to pay as the legal entity, but people can pay as the physical persons. Yes, this is the problem, not just in Slavyansk, but in Kiev. In Kiev, we also have such places where the tariffs are set. Big tariffs are set there. We have looked at that problem. We again emphasized attention to that and withdrew attention of the municipal mayor of Slavyansk to that, and Petro Dudnik is now doing a lot helping the IDPs, and in the churches they are also helping a lot. And together with my colleagues Iryna Lutsenko and Maria Ionova, we are working on the draft law. I hope that this week we'll submit it to the Verkhovna Rada. We drafted all the analytical papers to the government. Our IDPs receive this small assistance, which is 880 hryvnias, but that is what the state can pay them for leasing the housing. But all the accommodation which is provided now should get this privileged tariffs. And we'll be talking about that today with Natalia Yareska, who will have a meeting with the Poroshenko bloc faction. We understand how difficult situation is with the budget, but this issue is to be resolved. You are right. Why such trips are important when government officials go there to Donbass on a weekly basis to monitor the situation, to examine it, and in Kiev to think about how to address all these problems. And I would like to announce also, taking into account all this interest from mass media to the topic of IDPs and to the situation in the East, there is a decision made that every day, like Mr. Lysenko reports you on the situation in ATO zone, from the point of view of the Council of Security and Defense, the same way we will have everyday briefings from the Emergency Situation Service, from authorized representatives to inform about what the government is doing to address these problems, because the burden is huge. The government is trying, but sometimes we need to coordinate our efforts better and involve international institutions to that. No one expected that this will be happening. Kyiv Online, 3 questions. The IDPs for more than half a year. We have about 1 million of IDPs during this half a year. What will be happening with the new IDPs? You talk to every one of them, and you understand what will be happening next to this person, where these people will be taken, what will be done to them, besides them getting the status of IDPs. And the second question, Iryna was saying that the mayors left in some settlements today. The Donetsk Regional Council cannot get together because they all ran away. This year there will be local elections. How will these local elections be held, and how will these IDPs be voting who are scattered now all around the country? And the third question, when we had the Euro 2012, we had a vice prime minister who was coordinating all the efforts of the fans who were arriving, where they would be accommodated, to what hospitals will they go. We now have many more times more of IDPs, but we don't have a vice prime minister or any centralized body. Will it be set up? Thank you. The third question, the government identified that the curator on the issues of Donbass from the government is Gennady Zubko. He's not just coordinating all these efforts, but he will be meeting on a weekly basis with all the sectoral ministries, with international institutions. But there should be another person appointed who will be on a daily basis taking care of all that. I know that the letter was sent to the Prime Minister of Ukraine with the request to appoint the deputy head of the Emergency Situations Service on issues of Donbass. And we are preparing a big donor conference on issues of restoring Donbass. This will be an international conference with donors, and also it will be about accommodation for IDPs, and also creating jobs, because without that nothing will be possible. The IDPs are to get integrated into the society. The second problem is elections. That's mostly complicated, but the authorities will be putting all the efforts into making effective or into Minsk protocol to be executed. If we manage to achieve the situation when Minsk agreement is executed, then the ceasefire regime will allow to have local elections on the territory of ATO, and step by step to restore the legality on these territories, which are now controlled by the combatants. What is to be done for the people to elect
those who would care for them? You know, we are going there with this in view, but the mass media should monitor more, including the MPs who were elected from those regions. I, for instance, know the MP from Debaltsevo. I am interested in when he was there last. Also in Slovyansk, I asked them, you were voting, you elected an MP to the parliament. When was he here? He handed out to residents 300 hryvnia before the elections, and he didn't visit this place since the elections. His wife is now shaking the mayor, saying that they should do this. We should ask everybody, why, if you were elected from there, what did you do? How many draft laws have you tabled? And you know, we should work with the mass media, because you cannot talk to a million people. And this work with IDPs should begin not in Kiev, where they get the information on where they can go, but in Slovyansk. I think that we will improve it, and we will help the state emergency situation services, and will increase the number of psychologists. This is, you know, a terrible situation when people are living in train carriages, when kids live on the second shelf, and of course they need to know where they might go, where there's a dormitory, where there's a hotel, and we should pressurize the world as well, saying, yes, thank you for the help, but you should help us more, because we are protecting European values. We didn't, not a single country had 1 million of IDPs after the war, and Ukraine cannot cope on herself now, so you should convene a donor conference and help us. If we were saying previously that we should help children, I think we should evacuate families with children. This is a priority now, and we should address every region now, and first of all the communities, the people, for the provision of an opportunity to house those people. Just imagine a premises where 500 to 1,000 people live. How you can work with them? The smaller the groups are, the more quality the work with them may be. What to do? Most of families have their near and families where they can go. The matter is, we should persuade them to get away and to make their way to those places. They are afraid, they say they don't have money, but you should talk to them. One granny came out of a cellar, and she said, I have relatives in Russia. Will you help me in Russia? And we said, no problem. We will take you to Kharkiv, and then you will go to Russia. And she was weeping and saying, thank you for just talking to me. Because, you know, she was sitting for 3 weeks in a cellar, and all over this time no one talked to her because there's no access to this cellar. So for us the task now is how to work with people who are still there. I emphasize those are pro-Ukrainian people. This is a myth that they are pro-Russian. They love Ukraine, but they are intimidated by propaganda. They are intimidated by the fact that they cannot understand what's going on because they are being bombarded, and psychologically it's hard for them to accept what's going on. But we need this work. As for your question, I want to tell you that there's a coordination headquarters working on IDPs, and this headquarters works round the clock, and 14 representatives of central authorities are in this headquarters. And about the premises that we can use today, tomorrow, or later, there's a specific database with specific names, and this database is refreshed every day. And if a person comes to Kiev and makes it to this headquarters, then they are offered not just some region, but the specific district and the specific name of the object where he or she or their family can stay. And believe me, due to the work of our regional headquarters, the conditions are not bad for people to live through the winter and remain there later. And the last question for today, can you tell us about the general amount of people who have, over the recent week, were fled to the territory of Ukraine and to the occupied territory of Luhansk and Donetsk region? Do you agree that this is a sort of referendum? No, I don't agree, because I am sure that 30 people who went to the territory of the so-called DNR are people who were deceived, and they are Ukrainians. And of course, there's a lot of people who went away on their own, and we do not have the figure of how many people went to Russia over this time, because we know that only lies stem out of there. Same lies as about the humanitarian convoys, because after every such convoy, the number of shellings increases. Now such a convoy goes to Debaltsevo, but people, for some reason, are in the cellars. At the moment, we have many repairmen and repair teams who can start their repair works any day, but when they start to work, the Russian separatists, pro-Russian terrorists start to shell them and fire them. Over the last week, over the recent week, more than 5,000 people were evacuated by our state service for emergency situations, but another 1,000 have registered as people who came on their own. And you know, this figure may be bigger, because when people come on their own, they do not necessarily contact official bodies. But of course, there's a trend for a growing number. And what we will be doing in the nearest days, we will analyze the situation, inform you about the humanitarian corridors and humanitarian missions, and that we should do everything possible in order to create such a corridor. But the next key level is our appeal to the world. We do it every day. There should be a coming back to the Minsk agreements, a ceasefire, withdrawal of troops, a normal control on the Ukrainian-Russian border, so that arms are not supplied through this hole to the protectors of Russian language who speak only in swear words. And thank you for attention, and we hope that from now on, every day you will get information firsthand from the state service for emergency situations. And I think that your television channels may be interested in the work of our rescuers who are risking their lives every day, like they did this in the days of the Chernobyl disaster. There's a press secretary now, and they can provide you with a lot of information. Dear colleagues, within 3 minutes we'll have our next briefing. Thank you.